Before you start the photorealistic painting, I want to talk about some of the artists who have painted in this style. So we're going to first talk about the photorealism movement, and then in the coming weeks, I'll talk about contemporary artists that rely on photographs and make work that appear photographic. So let's start. We'll start with this slide. So when you look at this image, I want you to consider what about it suggests that it was painted from a photograph. Some of the suggestions that is painted from a photograph is the fact that it's highly detailed and it's of a scene that is quickly changing. So it would be very difficult, it would be impossible to make this without a photograph. Okay, so we're first going to talk about the photorealism movement. And the photorealism movement happened during the 1960s and 70s, and it continues into the present. And this is a group of artists that depended on photographs. They worked systematically from them, and they made paintings that looked photographic. So artists of the photorealism movement worked in a variety of media, including oil and acrylic painting, printmaking, and drawing. But since this is a painting class, we're going to be focused on the paintings. And the first key idea is that they worked from photographs. And the truth is a lot of painters from a lot of different styles utilize photographs. And this has occurred since photography was invented. But the differences with photorealism painters is that they depended on the photograph. Their work couldn't be made without it. Let's look at Linda by Chuck Close. And I'm going to get out of the window and just zoom up a little bit. And I want you to consider what about this painting suggests that it depended on a photograph. And what you may be thinking is how difficult it would be for her to hold this position for the length of time it would require for Chuck Close to paint it at 6 feet tall in this level of detail. And there's no way that, her hair wouldn't change from one day to the next. Like the little curl right here wouldn't be over here, or her facial position, wouldn't change, and her wrinkles wouldn't be a little different from one day to the next. Or maybe she had a zit one day and then it disappeared, and then it appeared 3 days later. Her complexion would probably change. What if she got a tan? That would change as well. So another key idea is that photorealist painters use mechanical or semi-mechanical processes to paint, and they use these processes to transfer the information, the visual information, from the photograph to the painting. And there's two methods that are most popularly used. One is a grid system, and the other is a projector system. And here's a picture of Chuck Close using the grid system. Okay, so the grid system is the system that we're going to be using in this class. And basically, a grid is placed over the photograph, and then a grid's placed over the canvas, and then the visual information is transferred from the gridded photograph to the canvas. And with some artists like Chuck Close, he not only transfers the drawn contours onto the canvas, but then he also uses it to paint one square at a time. So if you look at this one, just painting to the right, he completes one square, and then he goes onto the next square, onto the next square, onto the next square, until the painting's finished. So the other popular method is the projector method, and that's where the image is projected onto a canvas, and then the artist traces the contours, from that projected image, and then paints from that. The other key idea of photorealism is that photorealist painters make paintings which appear photographic. Okay, and this is not necessarily to say that they appear photographic when you're right up on them, 6 inches away, but they'll appear photographic from, 5 feet away. And they're not going to be very painterly. Okay, so a painterly painting is one where there's a lot of visual brushstrokes and oftentimes lots of thick paint. That's not to say that there aren't photorealism painters who do have visible strokes. It's just that they are more subtle than other movements. And you're going to have to go up pretty close for these strokes to be evident. An important artist to the Photorealism movement is Audrey Flack, and she was one of the only women artists among the original photorealists. And it's because the Western art world hasn't been, historically fair towards women. And a lot of the subject matter was of still lifes, and they're often highly emotive. Okay, so here's some of her works. And what I love about the one to the right is how the beads are coming outside the frame. That's really cool. Okay, another important artist is Chuck Close, and he's known for making these very large portraits of his friends. So this portrait's 6 feet tall. And when you look at his work, I want you to consider, why do you think he painted it? Like, what about uh, painting makes it different than if it was simply printed out? Because if you already had the photo, I mean, he could have printed it out at a very large scale, possibly. So why do you think he painted it? I'm not sure if there's a very clear answer to this, but something I want you to think about. Okay, and the last artist we're going to talk about, who's very important to photorealism, is Richard Estes. And he's known for making paintings of cityscapes, and often his paintings have lots of reflective surfaces. So lots of mirrors, lots of windows, and just other shiny surfaces. So often his paintings are a composite of multiple photographs. So it's not like he gets one photograph and works from that. He compiles them together, and it makes a painting from that. So his painting actually isn't something that can be sourced to one image, but multiple images. Here's some of the sources for my presentation if you'd like to do more research yourself.